When choosing your niche, it is important to start with what you know the best. First, the industry that you have spent the most time in, either working in or as an employee. Second, which offer have you sold the most for the most money and to which niche? Thirdly, what industry do you know the insider language of? If you can speak the language, decision makers will assume that you know the solution that they need. Fourth, is the industry growing or is the market shrinking? Fifth, do people in this market have the money to spend? Are they financially qualified? Six, are these individuals easy to contact? Seven, is the market in pain and can you solve it with your service? Focus on understanding the niche first, not the tools and the automations, because the tools may change. We've seen that with Make.com and N8N. If you're attached to one tool, rather be attached to the niche and committed to the niche instead of committed to the tool. Your commitment will outlast any tool, automation, or AI system. And even, and that's an important point, even if AI advances, not everybody wants a fully machine-based service. Some business owners will still want to hire you as an expert, but only if you are the expert for that niche and you articulate that in this way. Pick a niche, build trust, become the go-to expert in the market. That's easier said than done, and that's the encapsulation of a year-long process, but that's basically what we want to be doing. And the go-to expert in the market can also be just the expert in your local area or one of the experts. You don't have to be the preeminent best expert of all of them. You just have to be known as the person that specializes, that speaks the language, and that can understand and listen, because it's even more important to listen than to talk. You don't need to let your expertise shine. In fact, it is a sign of a real expert if you are confident enough in yourself that you can actually just listen and say a few right words and guide the conversation with the adequate information. So the tighter your niche, the more people assume that you've mastered it. That's an important point. When you specialize in a niche and you articulate that very clearly and concisely, people will assume that you have done it for a while, because that's also a question in a person's mind is like, have they done it or have they just started? Are they just saying that or have they really actually done it? Can they do that for me? Because in the beginning, everybody says, yes, I can do this, of course. But have they? And so when somebody sees your positioning statement, your niche statement, your USP, and you're that precise and that niche, they assume they must have done it for so long, otherwise they would never have gotten to that degree of specificity. Your specificity becomes proof that you've done it before. And it also filters out objections. Trust, capability, and implementation concerns vanish. So when you are able to articulate the problems and the solutions, especially also in the industry language, the decision maker in that industry will assume that you also can come up with a solution, because the solution is always taking into account the details. And if you don't even know the lingo, the language of that niche, the decision maker will always question whether you can actually provide a solution, because the solution will always be involving the details. And so the only objection left then becomes money. And if you financially qualify the person previous to that, and you have that narrow positioning statement, all that's left is the money objection. And then sales become fairly straightforward when you've concerned, or when you address the when you've qualified the person financially beforehand, and then you have the narrow and specific positioning statement. And the trust should be assumed at that point, when they know exactly this is who I'm for, this is the expert for me that I'm talking to. Then it's just a matter of, can they pay, and do they trust you, and do they believe that you can implement the solution, and do they trust themselves in giving you the necessary information and implementing the systems that you're going to suggest. But you never get there without niching. Being a generalist keeps you invisible. That's maybe too strong of a statement, but it certainly helps you become visible to only a few people if you niche down. And here's a psychological phenomenon that I've also explained in the post today, which is you will deal as a B2B agency owner with business owners, and business owners usually like to be in firm control, and they usually like to be told yes and to be successful, because the pain of rejection and the pain of not being good enough is usually part of a business owner's psychology. That's usually what draws a person to a pursuit of their own, right? An independent business. So people don't like to be told no because of exactly that psychological marker. And so if you then tell them no, the same psychological mechanisms work where they feel, well, but I do want to work with you. Who are you to tell me no? No, they won't say it like that, but that's the reaction. When you say no, I'm only for the hairdresser industry. No, I only serve the cannabis industry. No, I only serve healthcare in Australia. No, I only serve NGOs in southern Italy, right? Then people are like, well, but I want your service too. Can't I pay you more in order to get the service? It's quite interesting how they sometimes start to justify themselves and qualify themselves to you when you make yourself rare and when you put yourself into the position of being the expert and being able to say no to people. But you won't even get to that level of demand. You don't even get to that level of attractiveness to the clients if you don't have the courage to say no in the first place to other opportunities. And so you reject all of it and actually gain all of it. Because if you want to be everybody, like everything to anybody, you usually get nothing. But if you say, I'm only going to this for these people, then the entirety of that market opens up. And it's usually a manifestation of people not wanting to, they want too much too soon, all at once. And that also leads me to the second aspect that I would like to discuss right now when it comes to the shiny object syndrome. Oftentimes people deal with shiny object syndrome because they are seeking fulfillment in the shiny objects, meaning in the business. So what I've seen is that people who have boring businesses, for example, I get leads for dentists, I do social media and Facebook ads for real estate companies, I help, I do Instagram marketing for power tool supply chains. I help lead gen for chiropractors, physiotherapists, etc., etc. These very boring but very proven business models. What I found, if an entrepreneur seeks in the business for fulfillment, meaning wanting to have his or her emotional needs met, they usually reject those boring but proven businesses and they want something more shiny, more better, with more status and more validation attached to it. And so what I found is people who are willing to say yes to these boring but proven businesses are usually the ones that succeed. And what usually contributes to that is that they have a good circle of friends, they usually have a spouse, meaning they are not being with all different kinds of people for validation and pleasure, but they've realized that it is beneficial for business to commit to one person to spend the life with. Now, if you were in this position, you're like, well, what else? But a lot of people don't see it like that, especially, sometimes entrepreneurs who feel, I want the world and everything. And so it's easier for people to commit to a niche when you're generally fulfilled in your life. When you look to your business for fulfillment, you may reject the very opportunity that is in front of you that could make you financially independent, financially free, just because it feels too boring for you. And that's why I would like to invite you to question the criteria that you make the decision based upon. So when you're going through this decision-making process of like what niche to pick, because you have realized that to pick a niche is very beneficial, right? Maybe you've grown in pain and you've realized I'm doing too many things for too many people, and the people that I work with, they tend to be ungrateful and they don't treat me and my services with the necessary respect and gratitude that I think that they deserve. So I should niche down, right? And if you do that, you are usually considering a few choices. And so the question is, what kind of choices are they? And how do you evaluate them? And that is exactly what I've been looking to facilitate for you in the beginning of this video, where I walked you through these different decision-making points.